They are bombshell allegations of torture, detailed in public today by a senior Canadian diplomat. Richard Colvin is his name, and he told a parliamentary committee that he repeatedly warned military and government officials that Afghan detainees were being abused, but that his warnings went ignored and that he was told, in effect, to shut up. Leslie McKinnon reports.
I spent 17
As diplomat Richard Colvin began reading his statement, the crowded committee room fell utterly silent.
The most common forms of torture were beatings, whipping with power cables, and the use of electricity. Also common was sleep deprivation, use of temperature extremes, the use of knives and open flames, and sexual abuse, that is rape.
Colvin says Canada transferred many more detainees to Afghan jails than either the Dutch or British forces.
According to our information, the likelihood is that all the Afghans we handed over were tortured.
In an earlier affidavit, and again today, Colvin outlined how he sent 17 memos to the military and to Foreign Affairs, carefully copying 75 senior officials. No action was taken to stop the transfer of detainees until over a year later. Then he was told to tone it down.
Reporting, if it was sent, should be to a very limited number of people. And certain of the most sensitive items were removed before they were even sent.
Colvin testified that he and 3 colleagues discovered what he said was evidence of torture, in part by interviewing prisoners. Government MPs on the committee challenged him on that.
Did you ever see yourself with your own eyes tortured?
I saw firsthand people who had been tortured testify that they had been tortured and had marks of torture. I didn't personally witness the act of torture.
Now, these allegations that are being discussed here today would not even hold up in a court of law.
What they perceived as attacking Colvin's credibility outraged the opposition.
Judges never have first-hand evidence. They never see the crimes being committed. Police officers generally don't see the crimes being committed.
Why were they trying to undermine this witness?
Peter MacKay was Minister of Foreign Affairs at the time Colvin sent his memos.
Mr. MacKay, what did you make of Mr. Colvin's testimony? What are Canadians to make of it?
About to be on the cusp of
Lawyer Amir Adaran was one of the first to uncover evidence of abuse of Afghan detainees.
It's absolutely shocking to one's sense as a Canadian that our country would do this. We're in league with torturers. That's the bottom line, and many people in the current government will have to explain themselves.
Richard Colvin couldn't say for sure whether any government minister or the Prime Minister ever saw any of his memos. He did say that many of the Afghan detainees who were abused were ordinary people, taxi drivers, farmers, who were picked up and sent by Canadian forces to Afghan jails simply because, he said, they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Leslie McKinnon, CBC News, Ottawa.
Susan Ormiston has covered the Afghan story from Afghanistan for us. Tonight she's in Toronto. What struck you most about the testimony?
Yeah, what struck me was this pattern of secrecy from Ottawa that he describes. The memos he sent, how they were censored, and then he and his colleagues were told to be quiet and not let this go beyond a select 5 people, 3 in Kandahar, 2 right in the Privy Council office. In fact, it was David Mulroney, the point person in the PCO, who was talking to him about trying to corral this stuff. This kind of pattern, he said, got so bad that by spring of 2007, never mind the torture, diplomats were not even able to write that the security situation was deteriorating, which it was at that time. And of course, when this all broke open in Ottawa in 2007 in April, Prime Minister Harper said he knew nothing of the allegations, even though Colvin had been sending memos, 16 of them over the past year roughly. So we're not sure how far up the line they went.
A lot of this case will rest on the credibility of Richard Colvin. A lot of people talked about him today, but few of them actually know him. You do, because you run into him covering this story. What should we know about him?
Well, he was a senior political officer in Kabul in 2006-07, and he was responsible for intelligence, for basically keeping his hands on what was happening. He was the guy that reporters wanted to get a background briefing from when they arrived in Kabul to see how the situation has changed. And, he's still in the Foreign Service. He's at our embassy still in Washington as an intelligence officer.
Okay, got to leave it at that. Thanks, Susan. Susan Ormiston.